elections are scheduled to be held in Bolivia on the 18th of October 2020. They were initially scheduled to be held on May 3rd of this year after a sequence of events that led to the installation of an interim government happened on the 10th of November 2019. However, they were postponed due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. An early Hublio Foundation poll carried out by universities and media organizations found that 40.3% of Bolivians would vote in favor of the Movement Towards Socialism Party, or known locally as the MAS, whose current presidential candidate is Arce. Carlos Mesa, a former president, came in second in the poll with 26.2%, while the current interim president, Janine Áñez, trailed behind with 10.6%. Áñez announced her resignation from the presidential race on the 18th of September 2020. To avoid a second round, the election winner requires at least 50% of valid votes in the first round and a 10-point advantage over its closest competitor. The current president, Janine Áñez, has been accused by citizens and politicians alike for using the coronavirus as an excuse to stay in power. Nearly 10,000 people blocked roads and protested due to the presidential election delay from the coronavirus. As the election pushed back to the 18th of October this year, it created tension between the government parties of the former socialist President Evo Morales and others. The upcoming election is paramount for the Bolivian people because the return of the MAS party would lead to great tensions within the country. The party has threatened a return to power, which would leave Bolivia to be governed by the same principles they struggled to come out from under for nearly 15 years. Bureau Report, Democracy News Live.
Good evening, everyone. You're welcome to Democracy News Live, to our show It Matters. Today, we're discussing the Bolivian election. For Bolivia, a pandemic has just been part of the turmoil over the past 12 months. A disputed election, deadly riots, the toppling of Bolivia's first indigenous president, and what his backers considered a coup, the rise to power of a relatively obscure senator, and her failure to consolidate her presidency. Now, a presidential election on Sunday gives Bolivians at least a chance for a political reset. As they call it, it's a struggle with the dramatic costs of the COVID-19 pandemic. The leading contenders are former Economy Minister Luis Arce, who led an extended boom under ousted President Evo Morales, and former President Carlos Mesa, a centrist historian, a journalist who appeared to finish second to Morales in last year's annulled vote. Trailing behind in all the polls have been Luis Fernando Camacho, a conservative businessman who helped lead last year's uprising, as well as Korean-born evangelist. Overshadowing the vote is the absence of Morales, who led Bolivia from 2006 until 2019 and was a key figure in the bloc of leftist leaders who led power across much of South America. Today, he's sitting in exile and he's banned from standing for elections. To discuss all of this, let's first go to Transcontinental Times correspondent in Bolivia, Autumn. Autumn, you're welcome to the show. And I want to first start by asking you, Autumn, what is the situation? Is the situation in Bolivia calm as they go into the October 18th voting?
Well, first and foremost, thank you. It is great to be here. And yes, I would say for the moment, we are seeing a calm before a storm, if you will. Leading up until the election, for months, we have seen protests, we have seen demonstrations throughout the country, we have even seen road blockades that kept vital supplies from getting to cities like Santa Cruz and Cochabamba, when members of the MAS party were demanding that the second canceled election was reinstated. It was originally set to take place on May 3rd of this year. Then it was scheduled again for September. And after it was canceled in September, The Mas Party blocked the roads. There were thousands of roads throughout the country blocked. So, and vital supplies like oxygen, ambulances could not get through to hospitals. This was when the pandemic in Bolivia had reached its peak. So, this was a very critical time. But before,
So,
uh,
so,
it's okay.
so Autumn, Autumn. So, give me a sense. While there is calm right now, which is a good thing, but Bolivia has seen turmoil in the last few months. It's seen massive protests. It's seen a lot of challenges around, what's going on the ground. What do Bolivians really? What are they looking for? Are they looking for peace? Are they looking for a organized nation with less violence, or they're ready to continue living with a lot of the chaos which seems to have unfolded in the last few months?
Yes, they absolutely do want peace. The Bolivian people in general are very peaceful, pacifistic people. What they want more than anything else, regardless of who they're voting for at this point, I believe, is stability. A stable government that is not a temporary government. There are limitations with a temporary government with what they can do. And there have been some struggles with the one we have right now under Janina Nieves. So I think more than anything else, they want peace and stability, regardless who is actually elected.
So let me bring in Christian here. Christian, explain to me, where do the Bolivians stand when it comes to voting a political party? Uh, there were a lot of accusations for against Morales about the drugs and mafiosi. While on the other end, when you look at from the rest of the world's point of view, when they talk about left, it was about egalitarianism, but seems to be have been some challenges around that idea. Could you please shed a little light on what happened in the last election and why did the president have to run away and take exile in Argentina?
Yes, of course. Well, good morning. First of all, thank you for the invitation. And well, I think that most of the Bolivians' point of view has a lot of to do with how the government was managing the country the last years. Because, of course, at the beginning of Morales' government, we all had a very sense of good expectations for what they were going to achieve, since it was like the first president, indigenous president. We were most of the people in the country felt represented, so we had a very nice idea of a good things coming for us. But sadly, I don't know if this is the ambitions of staying in power or how everything changed in the last years. So they try to stay in the government against the will of the people, because even with this public voting that we have for the referendum, when the majority of the people voted that we want to take him as a president again for a new term, but he continued trying to stay in power. So right now the country is completely divided. We have on one side the people that supports Morales, and on the other side the people that wants a change, because it's been 14 years. I think that we have a very good idea of what will come in the future if the government of the mass continues.
Sure. Laura Soliz, she's a language instructor and a professional translator. Laura, give me a sense, when you're looking at the election, just around the corner, what are the people looking at and what do they really want from this election?
Well, good morning, first of all. Thank you for having me in the show. So I think that the country, as Christian noted, the country is deeply divided at this point. And while we want peace, we want the stability in this country, at the same time, different groups want different things. And this is when mass really comes to, well, that party, that political party is, of course, quite united to a point where no matter what they do, they're going to vote for them. So I think there lies something that is hard for other people to understand. And it's, on one side, we want peace, we want stability, we want to come out from this pandemic, we want to recover jobs for people, and we want, of course, to continue with our lives. But on the other side, we also have, we want a government that is capable finally of uniting people again, which at this point seems very difficult to do.
Explain to me, Laura, and it may be difficult to explain. What is that divides the people of Bolivia, and why are these challenges? I'm sitting here in India right now, and in India right now there is a whole challenge around religion and how people are very, very divided on the idea of religion. But what divides the Bolivians, and what are they looking for, really?
I think, well, the sense I got from talking to people is that what really divides us is a class, social class. Many people who support mass, for example, say, we want a government that belongs to us. We want our people in power, which also means that it is us, the indigenous population, people who support mass, versus the others. Unfortunately, this is a problem that has existed in Bolivia for many years, many years. And although we had the chance with Evo Morales, of course, to mitigate all of these sentiments, it hasn't really happened. You still hear people saying that the thing that really bothers them is that they are not seen, they are not treated respectfully, they are not considered as part of Bolivia. Of course, there might be different opinions on this, but what I heard from these people while talking to them is that they don't feel they are treated as first-class citizens. It might be discrimination in different places. It might be that they feel that they are looked down. They might feel that they are called uneducated. And this has created such a divide, such a division in the country that I feel it's going to take so many years to even start really recognizing how badly this is for some people. On the one side, I feel some people say that this is not the case, that everyone is respected, that everyone is treated as a same class citizen. But then you hear all these stories of discrimination, of racial discrimination as well. And I really have the sense that there is a group that feels is not treated as part of this country.
For the viewers joining us who want to understand Bolivia, Bolivia is a very small country. It's not a huge country. And what they have in place is phenomenal lithium reserves. I was interviewing the ambassador a couple of years ago, and he explained that Bolivia has been trying to bring people in. But a lot of the South American countries have a challenge around corruption. They have a lot of challenge around drugs. And Bolivia is no different. And in fact, the area from where Morales comes from and the groupings that they come from very much are the areas from where cocaine leaves Bolivia and then travels up north. So those are all challenge areas. Autumn, let me bring you in here to kind of shed a little light. Whenever any elections are unfolding in South America, the Americans always seem to have a perspective and say on it. When it comes to Bolivia, what is the American perspective on these elections in Bolivia? Is there a backing? Do they side a certain group, are there political parties in Bolivia that look up to the U.S. and there are some who don't?
Well, that's a really good question, actually. I do think the Americans feel a very specific way about the government and the situation here in Bolivia. The American government feeling rather differently, probably, than the American people. The American government has a bit of a chilly relationship, I would say, for the moment, with the Bolivian government, because when Evo Morales took power in 2006, he eliminated the DEA presence in Bolivia, which was to help regulate and eradicate the coca leaf production that came out of the region of Chapare. And Chapare is where, I guess you could say, that's where the bad coca grows. There is another region in Bolivia where they grow coca as well. in the Yungas, but that's not used for the production of drugs there. It's mostly in Chapare.
And then when
So when
DEA stands for Drug Enforcement Agency, just for the viewers.
yes,
Sure. Sorry, go
yes,
ahead.
sorry about that. Yes, it's such a well-known acronym. I sometimes take that for granted. But yes, so when Evo came in and he said no more relations with the DEA, that really kind of fostered a bit of hostility, or at least some antagonism between the US government and the Bolivian government. Now, the Bolivian government does not treat American citizens poorly by any means. They're very fair. There is still it's still very easy to get a visa to come visit here. So it's not as though Americans are like he's against, like this turned into something against Americans. It was more of a, they don't like the American government. And it's given Evo Morales' backing as a cocalero, like a syndicate boss from that region, that doesn't actually surprise me that he would not want United States drug enforcement involved with the operations going on in Chapare. But the American people, when they hear about things going on here, especially when no information came out about the revolution last year, I was still living here covering that, the post-election violence at the time in October and November. And there's a lot of sympathy, and the American people, by and large, feel much differently, I would say, than the American government. The American people just want Bolivians to have peace. I would say they want them to have stability. And there's a lot of sympathy there for a nation.
Great. Christian, let me come to you asking in terms of, when we look at the landscape financially, how do Bolivians get by in terms of what is their main source of income? How are they as a country? And what has happened in the last few years? I know a lot of other South American countries are suffering, but in terms of the possibilities of industry and the growth possibilities, where does the future for Bolivians lie?
Well, basically here we feel citizens that we have a lot of opportunities to grow economically. Yes, looking at the other countries' situation right now, we can see that they're going through very rough situations right now. But in our case, I think that we had a lot of opportunities. But at the same time, the problem with the instability that we have, talking about work in general for professional people, for example, it's something that is being here for a long time. I think that we have a lack of industry in the country. We should try to take more advantage of our natural resources. For example, the lithium that you were mentioning here that we have, and we couldn't find a good way to actually make these kind of things give us, as a country, something that we could live on, and we could have more advantages. We had a lot of gas and natural resources that we should have take advantage in the moment, but I think that in some way we couldn't find a good way to actually use it in favor of the country. So individually, as people, we have the businesses that we try to open on ourselves sometimes meet a lot of problems with taxes and all the permissions that we need to basically grow as business people. So they found a way to actually stop us from growing up. So it is something that is we feel that we can't invest in our own country because most of the things that we do are basically going to the government, and so we cannot continue growing. But we feel like we have a stability, like an economical stability, compared with other countries that are actually having a very rough time right now.
Laura, do you want to weigh in terms of where is the future for Bolivians when you look at the country and its people? Out of these elections, what will people finally be hoping for? Obviously, you highlighted the idea that the Bolivians want Bolivia for Bolivians, and when you talk about Bolivians, you mean the indigenous people. But beyond that, because Morales was around for a long time. It's not as if he wasn't around. So what is that people are looking for out of this election?
Well, I think first of all, they want stability, like Autumn said. We want a government that has all the power and capability of enacting. And then we also want, of course, a government that is not so corrupted as all the previous governments. Um, it sometimes feel like we are pretty much living in a hopeless situation when it comes to corruption, because it has happened over and over again, to a point where we have some sort of cynical outlook on this, that, well, no matter what we do, no matter who we elect, let's get the least corrupted government. We want opportunities, of course, to grow as a country, as Christian mentioned. There is so much bureaucracy on the way to even begin to think of having a business or owning a business or starting a business. So we want definitely a government that is stable enough to enact, to pass laws that can help Bolivians to grow.
Autumn, if I can ask in terms of violence, where does Bolivia stand? Because of the South American countries, here obviously Bolivia has seen a lot of chaos in the last year and a half. This change of, but where does Bolivia stand when it comes to violence? Is it controllable, or does violence, pervade a large part of Bolivia because of the whole drug mafiosi?
Well, that is a great opportunity to help clear up. I think a common misunderstanding in this country is that there's a lot of it's related to drugs. Normally, that is not true. Normally, the dealings of the cocaleros and chapare is very limited in that area, meaning as long as you don't go in there and bother them, they're not come bother you. Now, obviously, last year when we overturned and this was a set of circumstances where we saw the cocaleros come out of jail with guns, no less. Keeping in mind that the average Bolivian citizen does not have the ability to own firearms like, say, in the United States. So they came out and they attacked part of the city of Cochabamba. But that was also a unique scenario. They were fighting to keep their leader in power, and so that's not something that you would normally see here. There's definitely not a lot of violence related to drugs here at all, like in some larger nations. Bolivia, in large, is mostly farmers and small business owners. And from the cocaleros' perspective, they see themselves essentially as farmers, and they just want to be left alone to farm for the most part. So yes, Bolivians will go as far as they need to achieve their aims, regardless of what side you're on. However, they are not quick to go to violence at all. I've lived in 5 nations in America, and I would say I've never felt safer than I do here. To be truthful.
So, just getting a sense of where this election is going, if you look at all the political parties, the MAS obviously has about 26% of, the share of the election, of the vote, while the party that follows them is far behind. It's not that close in terms of, how much part of the share it's going to have. These are the exit polls, correct? I'm assuming that's the number coming out of the exit polls. Now, if MAS comes back to power, do you think that Morales will be able to come back to Bolivia as well?
Evo Morales is currently residing in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and he has made many public statements saying that he has every intention of returning to Bolivia. MAS return to power. However, he is not able to run or be president. I'm sure that his party will put him in some essential and very influential role in government here. So his influence will still very much be a part of the political theater here if the MAS should return to power. And that's what a lot of people, I think, are worried about.
So, understanding Bolivia's situation is going to go through a little bit more of a turmoil, if you want to call it that. But if the mass returns, a lot of the Bolivians feel that this is the party which belongs to Bolivians, like Laura also mentioned, that it's a party of the people of Bolivia, an indigenous, representation, so to call it. But again, there are challenges around corruption. They're certainly been in power for many years. They've just been out of power now for over a year now. So it's not going to be an easy journey, but Bolivians will have to decide on who they want to bring in and what is the kind of nation they need. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Christian. And thank you, Autumn, for joining me for this show. We'll come back to you on October 18th when people vote.